All right, awesome. Welcome, everybody. This is our talk about dynamic content with localization and suitability. So if you recall back to Dave's talk yesterday, we talked a lot about how Roblox will dynamically adapt through policy to really support users all around the world in different languages. So this talk is really going to be a deep dive into how exactly we do that. But before we get into it, I want to start with introducing ourselves. So I am Matthew Dean. I'm a principal product manager for the Creator Cloud here at Roblox, and I've been here 5 years. But before that, I was a developer in the community, like you all are.
I'm Alice Tolpink. I'm leading the engineering team that is responsible for content suitability. Our goal is to help you make your content suitable for as many users as possible.
All right, thanks, Ala. So we want to start with a high-level description of our mission. So really, what are we trying to achieve here? We want you to be able to take your experience and make it available to as many people around the world as possible through content that works across language, across region, age, and device. The way we want to do that is not through you creating a game specifically for kind of a certain segment, as is often common in the industry, but through adaptive configuration and policies that make it work everywhere. But what that look like? So our app itself is adaptive, as you probably know. Depending on who you are, where you're logging in from, you'll see a different experience. Even the games you see recommended or the avatar items are different. But what does that look like for your experience? So we're going to go into our content vision, and this is something I don't think we've shared publicly for the most part. So it'll be very interesting. But basically, for content, we want to figure out how do we allow you to make things beyond what are possible on the platform today. We have two kind of key star examples that we will reiterate throughout this presentation. One of them is a social experience where you're able to chat with your friends. And those friends could be speaking a different language, or they could be just around the world. They could have different ages than you. How do we enable that sort of communication safely and civilly? The other one, and credit to Pop-Tart Noah and Canyon Jack, who worked on this early version of a game, but essentially, how do we enable more aged-up experiences? So here we have a screenshot showing a little bit more violence than is allowed on Roblox today with our terms. This was an unreleased game that they worked on and I think modified later, but this kind of shows the sort of experience that we're hoping to be able to support through the tech that we'll talk about later in the presentation. So the way this talk is going to go is I will talk about translation, and then after that, Ala will talk about suitability and deep into that. So for translation, what is this about? It's about making sure not only the whole app, but really your experiences work well and are understood by players. There's the portion of your game that you control, like the UI, the interface, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you to translate that so that anyone with any language can understand it. But there's also the element of inter-player communication. How do people who are using text or voice chat communicate with each other in a way that they can understand? Can you make a friend with someone who speaks a different language? Why would you want to do all this? I think there's the obvious kind of closing the communication gaps vision that we have, but there are tangible benefits for your game. So I can't go into too much detail on the data yet. This is something we're hoping to share more insights with developers soon. But we have run many different experiments at Roblox, found that it does improve engagement time. If your experience is localized and players are in it, they're able to understand it better, they can play longer. As well as if the metadata around your game, if the title, description, thumbnail are localized, this tells players that you've built your game for them and that they'll be able to have a good experience. So both of these are ways to attract a larger player audience and are really, really crucial. So before we talk about Roblox's approach, I want to dive into what does the industry do. The industry typically has a very kind of methodical step-by-step process where first you decide what audiences do you want to market your experience or game to. You pick a set of languages based on monetization or based on possible engagement, and you say, all right, I want to localize my experience to these languages. I need to take all of the strings that are in my game that are going to be shown to users, extract them into a separate file, find some sort of translation agency or a contractor to take these strings, translate them, give them back to me, and then put that back into the game. So this can be a laborious process. It can take weeks even to find translators, and then any time to go through and review the strings and send them back to you to include in the final build. If you're changing your game, like with Roblox, you often adapt your game over time. It's very difficult then for you to be able to go and make changes on the fly because you'll be losing that language support that you had. So for our approach, it's a little bit different than the industry. We use automatic cloud translation, where we automatically scrape all the text in your games for you. You don't have to do anything. Put it in our cloud. And then you have the option of either using our default machine translations, where no human looks at it. We actually run it through an automated pipeline. Or you can use our tools and let translators collaborate and provide their own strings. We have developers who do both, actually, where they kind of use automatic translations as the default, and then they override in certain languages where it makes sense. So this is really crucial. We have a screenshot here showing what that looks like. If you go to our developer portal, you can see how to add collaborators. It's very simple. You can add individual users. You can add groups. I want to talk a little bit more about machine translation and how that works. So we have built out a machine translation service. It currently supports 11 different languages, but we're looking at expanding that support. And it allows you to, again, automatically translate to those languages. The great thing about this, and the way we built it, is that any improvements we make to the quality will help over time your game automatically improve. So you don't need to do anything. You sort of turn it on, and the improvements will kick in as things get better. If you've been following the industry at all, machine translation is something where there have been steady improvements. We're always looking at different models and different algorithms to improve things there. All right, so now that I've talked about the current state, what is next for translation? So there are a couple key things we're working on or looking at. One of them is really giving you insights into where are your players and what languages are they speaking. So we're calling this locale analytics. And we've built up the framework to be able to make this possible. But we want you to understand, where is your audience today? Where is the potential for it to be? And how could translation help? So we'll be exposing that in a bit. There are some other things that we're looking at. So the automatic translation of your metadata, so title, description, even icon if it has text in it, is going to be really critical for letting your players know that your experience works for them. So that's another piece where we want to make it as easy as possible for you to have this happen automatically. We've talked about higher quality machine translation. This is something the team is constantly working on, and we have dedicated resources around. And then the last one, super exciting for me at least, is Runtime UGC text translation API. So the idea is you can call a Lua API in your game as players are typing, as they're sending messages, as they're writing pet names, and have all that translated. But what would that actually look like? So here we have a demo, the player chatting in their native language, and then it gets automatically translated to the recipient's language and vice versa. So you're seeing a dynamic, real-time interaction that would not otherwise be possible. We're also looking at, for this, could we leverage voice and take voice, convert to text, use this translation API as a way to connect people even if they're not using just text chat. So that's a little sneak peek of what we're working on. And with that, I will kick it over to Ala, who will talk about suitability.
Thank you. Hello. I'm going to talk about content suitability. So let's start by trying to understand what is content suitability. So content suitability defines what is suitable, what is not suitable for every given user. What are the things that can affect that? First of all, there's a legal reason. Some regions have some regulations, some laws that decide what is and what is not allowed. A few examples: loot boxes may not be allowed in Belgium, or trading with paid items may not be allowed in South Korea. There are cultural conventions. For example, some cultures may be more tolerant to violence than other cultures. Or some language may be perfectly fine in one region and one dialect, but may be considered offensive in another. On top of these things, some content can be perfectly suitable and perfectly appropriate for some users, but it may not be understood. So, for example, kids may have a hard time understanding some complex scientific concepts. So if your experience contains some assumption about understanding or context in that area, it may be less relevant for kids. Another example is around cultural regional conventions. So let's say your experience uses the imperial measurement system. Then some players that are coming from other countries that are used to the metric system may have a hard time understanding that. Why should you care about content suitability? So I guess, what do you care about? You care about keeping your content available. You care about reaching the widest audience. And these are exactly the things where content suitability is going to help you. We're going to make sure that your content is compliant and therefore available in all the regions it can be available in. We'll help you reach the widest audience by surfacing relevance to the users. This way, users can find the content that is most relevant for them, and you can find the users that are going to enjoy your content the most. On top of all that, we also give you the flexibility to make your content even more suitable for more and more users. How do we do it? So we automatically enforce regional compliance rules. So based on the features that your experience contains, we will make it available only in the countries and the regions it is allowed in. A value for you is you kind of avoid the situation when your content needs to be taken down globally because it happens to be not compliant in one random country. And all that with minimal effort on your end. Another thing that we'll do kind of to help keep your content suitable is we are surfacing information about the experience to the player. So this way the players can find the content that's most suitable for them. And in this way, we can also kind of reach more and more users. And lastly, there's a way for you to increase the suitability of your content by using our dynamic policy APIs. So what are the user attributes that affect content suitability? There's region. As I mentioned, there are different laws in different regions. There are different cultures that affect what is suitable, what is not suitable. There's the age of the player. Some content may be not suitable for kids, or some content may be suitable for kids but not understood by kids. Or some content may be built for kids and not as appealing for more mature audiences. Then there's platform. If your experience is tailored for, let's say, VR, then it's maybe not as great on other platforms. So you may want to either disable it on other platforms or maybe adjust it dynamically based on where the user is coming from. Another example is network connectivity. If your experience requires very fast internet connection and you have some users experiencing it from mobile with poor connectivity, you can maybe adjust your experience to make it great for them as well, even though it's going to be slightly different from what other users would be experiencing. And on top of all that, there are also parental controls. Parents can decide what is and what is not suitable for their kids. So how is content suitability determined? And there are a few fundamental differences between how the industry does it and how Roblox does it. First of all, the type of the content. Gaming industry, content ratings are describing games. Roblox experience guidelines are describing rich metaverse experiences. Metaverse experiences can contain all the functionality that the games can contain, but they can also contain interactions between users, things like voice chat. And these kind of things haven't been addressed by the industry content rating so far. Another difference is regional versus global. In the industry, different regions have different authorities that decide what is appropriate for a given age. Roblox is designing one unified system that is going to be applicable for all regions, all ages. And this will help keep the age ratings consistent across all the regions. And the last and the most important one, industry content ratings are static. It means that a given experience in a given region has exactly one age rating. So if you want your experience to be rated for all ages, you can't include any elements or any functionality that won't be suitable for kids, for example. In Roblox, our experience guidelines are dynamic. So even if the experience is rated for all ages, you can still include elements that are only suitable for older audiences, as long as you're dynamically disabling them for kids. So this way, the same experience can be suitable for all ages and all regions. So let's talk about experience guidelines. What are they? So Roblox experience guidelines are based on experience descriptors. Descriptors add information about the experience that helps determine suitability. It includes things like themes, for example, levels of violence. It includes things like features, like loot boxes or voice chat. Then based on the guideline, based on the descriptors, we determine compliance and relevance guidelines. Compliance guidelines help you make sure that your content is compliant and only available in the regions it is allowed in. They are restrictive. So if the experience is not allowed in a given region, we're going to disable it for you. Age relevance guidelines, on the other hand, they help the user to find the content that's most relevant for them. They surface information to the user, but they're not restrictive. So they don't affect availability of the content. One exception are parental controls. Parents, as always, can decide what is and what is not suitable for their kids, and experience guidelines is one thing that they can specify. So how does it work, and what does it require from your end? Pretty straightforward. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and we'll take it from there. For now, just 2 questions in this example, but basically based on your answers, we're going to determine what are the experience descriptors, what are the features, and what are the themes that are present in your game. We're going to apply some rules to them, and as a result, we're going to determine whether there are any countries that your experience is not compliant in, and we're going to determine the age recommendation for the experience. You'll have an opportunity to preview this information before you're submitting it, and once you actually submitted it, the experience guidelines are applied to your experience. It means it's only going to be available where it's allowed in, and the users will start seeing the age recommendation as well as experience descriptors that kind of describe your game. So far we talked about content suitability, what it is, how it's determined, how it's used. Now the question is like, what can you do to make your content suitable for more users? Industry approach is you would need to create separate build for every region or every permutation of your experience that you want to have. It means that you need to either understand all the regional laws or hire somebody who does, and you'll need to maintain all these different builds. Roblox approach is very different. You can have one single experience that is going to be suitable for all regions and all ages. How can you do it? All you need to do is use our policy APIs and dynamically modify experience based on the player. And this way, every user is going to have slightly different variation of your experience that is the most suitable for them. We make the experience available only in the regions it's compliant in, but you can adjust your experience to be compliant in all the regions. Same goes for age. We will surface the age recommendation for the user, but you can modify your experience to make it suitable for kids as well as adults. In this example, you can see that, let's say, skeletons are not allowed in China, and you have a player that is from China. So you can just dynamically modify the experience for them to show a robot, for example. This way, this specific user is going to experience it in a way that is compliant for them, but all the other users can still continue kind of have the richer experience that you initially intended. And same for age. Like, for example, like in this example, maybe realistic guns are not appropriate for kids. So if somebody younger is experiencing your experience, you can replace that with, let's say, a toy gun. But older audiences will still experience it in a way that is more appealing for them. And here's an example for how we can use our policy APIs. Pretty straightforward. You're calling our policy service. It returns you a policy info object, and all you need to do is check for the feature you're interested in that object. If the feature is allowed, you're free to use it. If it's not allowed, you can provide some alternative functionality to the current user. So far we talked about experience guidelines, how they can help the users find the content that's most relevant for them. As I mentioned, age recommendations are purely informational. So we don't restrict availability of the experiences based on age recommendation. And it means like any user can experience any experience on the platform. What it means for you is that you're only allowed to create content that would be safe for kids. And this limits a little bit of kinds of content that you can create on the platform. So what if we did allow you to create content that is more mature, and we made sure that this is only going to be surfaced to the audiences it is allowed for? Once we're able to determine age recommendation, and we are able to restrict availability based on experience guidelines, there's no reason why we wouldn't allow you to create more mature content, and we'll make sure that is only available for whoever it's supposed to be available to. So what kind of content can exist on the platform once we do open it up? A few examples we thought of: levels of violence, or more dynamic text filters. Roblox text filters are pretty strict because we want to keep our users and kids safe. But if we know that a given experience is only going to be available for 17+ users, there's no reason why we wouldn't allow more free communication. Voice chat is kind of one example for that. It is only allowed for older users. So with a given experience, you can't really assume that all the users in your experience are going to have it available. But once your experience is tailored for 17+ users, you can actually assume that everybody have it enabled and actually build some interesting kind of experience around the voice chat, kind of assuming that everybody has that. So there's just kind of a few ideas we had. And I'm super curious to hear what kind of cool and crazy ideas you all can come up with once it's actually available for you. Now I bring it back to Matthew.
All right. Thank you, Alla. So we wanted to summarize a bit of what we've talked about. We know we covered kind of a wide breadth of content, but really the focus is for translation. We have translation tools as well as automatic translation, which you can take advantage of. And we have plenty of documentation around those. For ensuring content is compliant at runtime, we have an existing policy API. We'll be looking at expanding that in the future. You can go read about that. And for experience guidelines, that's the new piece that we presented here. So there isn't a ton of documentation, but we'll be working on dev forum announcements that will be coming out, sharing more insights into what we're planning and getting more feedback from all of you. So that's the high-level summary of this talk. I think there's a lot that we expect to see and want to see from all of you in terms of how can you creatively leverage the capabilities that we're giving you. So we're looking forward to that. And I think that is it for our talk.
Thank you.